Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and Season 3 of War Within is finally here, which means a whole new slew of gearing opportunities than ever before, from raids, delves, open world content, as well as in dungeons. For dungeons in particular, there's actually a couple of different sources of gear. Outside of the normal Mythic Plus content, we also have greater challenges, such as the hard mode dungeon of Tazavesh, a mega dungeon 8-boss instance that actually has increased difficulty, but also an opportunity for increased rewards, with hero track gear dropping from every single boss encounter, one if not two items at a time, but also potentially mythic track gear from dungeons if you can complete the hard mode version without any deaths whatsoever. And recently I got to actually do hard mode Tazavesh, and I found out that it's actually quite different from its Shadowlands origins. So for today's video, I wanted to go over a guide on how to defeat every single one of the hard mode bosses of Tazavesh, and I also wanted to go over the easiest methods ever as to how you can defeat every one of these bosses for a potential mythic track rewards, as long as you have a perfect deathless run. As always, if you guys want to see more regular guides like these for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Tazavesh Hard Mode Dungeon is the only version of like a Mythic Zero version of this entire instance. So you get a much harder version of the instance that's not that like super incredibly highly scaled. It is scaled to be roughly around difficulty over like a +10 difficulty in terms of enemy health and damage. So if you've ever ran those dungeon streets or gambit on a +10, that's more or less the difficulty of the bosses and enemies. What is difficult for this entire instance, however, is the extra mechanics that every single boss has, and that is going to be the most difficult part. It's just mechanically the fights are going to be just a little bit more, but the actual damage itself is not that much worse for the most part. And the gear rewards out of all these fights on the base Mythic Zero means that you can get a bunch of hero track items from every single boss, with every boss dropping at least one item that's hero track, but sometimes two, so it's potentially could be an opportunity for everybody in the group to get some nice boost of item level gear. It is going to make the dungeon just last a little longer with all the extra mechanics, and in a way they're treating the mega dungeon as like a mini raid experience, so you're not going to be able to clear it in like 30 minutes or anything like that. It is going to take about an hour or so. So that is one of the bits of preparation that you will need to do before you actually dive into the bosses. But the actual boss mechanics themselves are not all that bad. From the first boss encounter of Zofex the Sentinel, the boss itself is actually about the same. The only difference is now there's going to be the mini boss, usually a mini boss that you gotta kill before you summon up Zofex. Now that mini boss is going to be present during that fight on hard mode. The boss himself isn't that difficult. The mini boss also isn't difficult by themselves, but together they can be definitely quite annoying. And there's some bad overlaps, like somebody getting hit with interrogation while a beam goes through them can put them in a really tight spot. The easiest thing you should do here is Bloodlust and nuke down that mini boss as soon as possible. I would go for a full single target build to take that thing out immediately, as quickly as you can, in order to get through the most annoying parts of mechanics out of this fight as quickly as possible. But the rest of the fight is actually fairly straightforward. Kill Zofex and you're good to go. From there, the next two bosses can be done in any order, but I will go over them in terms of the order that we did them normally, which is the Menagerie. Now, the main mechanic of Menagerie on hard mode is all of the other bosses, from Alcrex to Acolyte to Venza, all of them coming out at a much faster pace. Normally, they wait until the first boss in front of them is low on health before they start to come out, but now they're on a timer where the first two bosses are going to be up fairly early on. So for this one, you're basically doing a boss rush here. You want to lust as soon as you have the first two bosses out, and then cleaving down as quickly as possible. Still, the kill order is going to be Alcrux, then Acolyte, then Venza. But you just try to burn them as quickly as you can. You're just having to deal with the overlapping mechanics a lot earlier into the encounter. The next boss we did was the Postmaster, the Mailroom Mayhem fight. For this one, the only difference is when the packages come out and you got to pick them up and drop them into vents. When you're holding the package, you're rooted. Any root breaks, however, like Hunter Disengage when they talented correctly, or Druid's Power Shifting from one form into the next, anything that break roots will break the roots here. So if you have classes with root breaks or with root immunities, that would be those best classes to pick up the packages and toss them out. If you have like a druid that could just spend the time, you know, power shifting from cat to bear form to then get rid of the package very quickly, that can help make the fight easier. Another thing you could do is, if you don't have any root breaks, is to pick up the package, throw it a short distance, and then run under the package to catch it again. So you basically are tossing it in the air and catching it until you can finally dispose of it in the vent. But outside of this, the fight is exactly the same. Miser's Oasis, however, is going to have a whole new set of enemies present for this encounter. After doing the music note minigame, the first set of enemies is going to be the same. It's just going to be security and a couple of patrons, but the second set of enemies after the second set of notes is actually going to be the Ventier band. The ones that you saw at the beginning of the fight before they get kicked out, yeah, they're back and they're in full swing. The easiest way to bypass this mechanic is to say Bloodlust for all of them, unless you feel like you have enough damage and you want to Bloodlust the boss instead. It is actually easier just to Bloodlust him to get rid of him as quickly as possible if you feel like you've got the boss fight down, and focus on Evely the entire time. She has a lot of casts, try to interrupt as many of them as possible and nuke her down as quickly as you can. The rest of the enemies do a bit of AoE damage and have some frontals and AoE circles for you to dodge, but for the most part they're not really all that much more difficult. From there on, the fight is exactly the same with the final boss with exact same mechanics. The next fight is going to be Osmi, which actually, looking at a bunch of guides, I saw a lot of people mark this boss as Sozami. Just something that I noticed was really weird. Every guide calls it Sozami for some reason, but the actual boss name is Osmi. Anyway, Osmi, for this mechanic, this is going to be the wall boss, and normally as the fight progresses, he puts up more and more walls for you to have to get around with portals. However, on hard mode, all those walls are present from the start. So the annoying teleport mechanic to all the different quadrants of the room, yep, that's going to be made available from the start of the encounter. Another change that's available is double technique, the interrupt mechanic. Normally, you need to interrupt this boss twice in order to stop the double technique from going off. This time, you're gonna have to do it 3 times. And every time you interrupt the boss, he'll teleport to a new quadrant. So for this fight, the only easiest thing you could do is to try to keep your head on a swivel and try to call out portals. Usually have one person, like the lead, like the tank, coordinate where everybody's gonna go to each portal. And when the boss does do double technique, or really triple technique this time around, then you really want to try to see if you can spread all your interrupts through different quadrants, so you can interrupt the boss as soon as he teleports to it, so you can get one kick in one quadrant, second kick in another, and third in the other, just to play it super safe. But otherwise, this fight is all about paying attention to which portals you gotta go to get to the different sections of the boss arena. The next fight is Hilbrand, and Hilbrand has a new enemy that's going to be made available. There's going to be an extra ad present in the fight that needs to be interrupted regularly, otherwise his cast will likely wipe your group. So for this encounter, I actually think instead of going pure single target damage builds, you should go for a cleave build, just to cleave the ad, Hilbrand, and any of the other little ads, the purification ads that he ends up summoning throughout this encounter. So the easiest way that we found to do this fight is not to focus on the boss and cleave everything around him, but instead focus on the Stormbound Breaker new ad he summons and cleave off of that ad on everything else. This makes it safer, ad dies super quickly, you don't need that many interrupts to, deal with a one-shot mechanic, and the rest of the ads you just deal with them as normal. Another change for this fight is whoever is interacting with the console at the front of the boss arena is the only person that can see where each and every single one of these orbs go. However, the sanitization mechanic does not happen, quicker on hard mode. You don't have less time to get all of the orbs in the right consoles. So this part of the fight is all about having the person at the front of the console give as accurate information as possible to where each orb goes. Because if you fail and put an orb in the wrong console, that's going to be a wipe. So whether you have like a Discord call that you're all in, or you're streaming your screen to everybody so everybody in the group can see which orb goes where, for instance, or if you just want to type out like front left, orange, back left, blue, front right, yellow, and then you kind of know where the fourth orb is going to go by that point. Whatever it takes, as long as you are accurate with the information, that's all that's needed. You don't need to rush this phase whatsoever. The next boss is going to be Timecap Hooktail, and the main mechanic for this boss is, throughout the encounter, the boss is going to summon Corsair Brutes. And these Corsair Brutes normally can be hit by the boss's breath ability that a tank can aim at those ads in order to wipe them out really quickly. However, on hard mode, all these ads now have a shield that prevents the first breath from killing them, so you have to hit them with 2 breaths to take him out. What we found for our group in particular is the ads themselves, it's a lot easier just to nuke them down and cleave them down with the boss. So we try to stack together on top of the boss as early as possible. Also, these ads become more difficult and harder hitting as the fight goes on, because all these brutes will get double time as an ability where every 2 seconds they get scarier and scarier and scarier, getting better movement speed, getting better attack speed. But at the very start, these ads are actually very tame and don't really hit all that hard. So what we did is we positioned the boss actually where the ads spawn, kind of like by the little boats over by the shore, and then nuke them down as soon as they appear. Move the boss when there's more fire, when there's more cannonful barrages, and then nuke the ads real quickly. But since we're all very melee and heavy cleave stack for this composition, we decided we're just gonna cleave the ads as soon as we can. We didn't try to slow them too much. We try to hit them with breath here and there, but for the most part, as soon as they're near the boss and they're in the cleave range, we're hitting them as soon as we can. We're locking them down with the stun as soon as we can. And when they are, have been around for a while, they have had that haste buff and movement speed buff ramp up for quite a bit. Then we'll try to see if we can knock them back, slow them down, keep them away from the healer, keep them away from the rest of the group, but we will be actively cleaving them and nuking them as quickly as we can. And we found that to be much easier than having to deal with them with the breath mechanic. I think maybe a range comp might be able to, like with the Frost Mage, root them, slow them, hit them with a Ring of Frost, keep them away with knockbacks, all these little things. You might be able to keep them at a distance, just letting them tank, hit them with 2 breaths in a row. But as a melee comp, we found just going full AoE and cleaving them down as quickly as possible was, for us, for our composition, the best choice forward. The final boss is going to be Solia, and the main mechanic you'll have to battle with is Collapsing Star. This time around on hard mode, 4 charges have to be soaked by Collapsing Star. Every time you soak a Collapsing Star, you get a pretty nasty debuff that makes you take more damage from that star. And every time you gas off a chart of star, it starts to pull everybody towards it. But the easiest way a lot of groups found to do this, and you can either do this by having one person soak, then the next and the next, and spread the debuff out, or even better, an easier strategy is to just have the tank soak all 4 charges. The tank is going to take the least amount of damage from the star, and they can pop a massive defensive cooldown just to survive the damage. And as long as they don't refresh the dot and give it a second charge, as long as they wait for the star dot to fall off completely before soaking the next charge, that seems to be the fastest and the easiest, safest way of doing this encounter. It is easier if you have a mobile tank like a warrior or maybe like a monk or a demon hunter. They can leap over to the star and start gassing off charges very quickly. But outside of that, for the most part, the fight is about the same. The star mechanic continues into phase 2, however, so it's going to be pretty annoying, and timing it in phase 2 does become difficult, especially with all the relics exploding and doing AoE damage and sending spokes everywhere. But if you do have a mobile tank that can do this fairly quickly, you should be able to get through this part fairly easily. Another thing that's different is when the boss phases into phase 2, when she gets all Archon mode and she gets these relics that give her immunity, you gotta send the line that everybody gets during that encounter through every single relic at once. All 5 relics need to be hit instead of just 2 relics here, then 3 relics there. The Hyper Light Jolt needs to hit every single relic in order to be able to get through the immunity phase. These relics are also a bit more mobile, so it's better to have everybody stand in their own area of the boss, kind of like when the relics initially spawn, and try to run to the closest relic to make sure the line goes through that relic every single time. Outside of this, the rest of the encounter, the only hard part is the star, but everything else is about the same. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, especially if you want to keep up with any future guides or potentially any new announcements regarding the Midnight expansion, which we should be getting sometime later this evening. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.